Do you struggle to know when you're feeling hungry? If so, keep watching because this video is for you. In last week's video, we talked about hunger cues, different ways hunger cues present through the body and the mind. If you missed that or need a refresher, you can access it through the link in the description. So once we know intellectually or through embodiment what hunger cues might feel like in our body, right? Very individualized practice. My hunger cues may be very different from your hunger cues. So really taking the time to get curious about your body and your mind as to how it's telling you. So today we'll be diving into reasons as to why you might not have access to your hunger cues and ways that you can work towards reattuning to them. So to start, I want to introduce you to a word that you may or may not have heard of before, and it's called interoception. Interoception is our ability to recognize cues from the body, right? So knowing when we're thirsty, when we're hungry, when we have to go to the bathroom, when we're tired, when we're feeling pain, right? And you may have access to some and maybe not others. And the thing with interoception is that it's not only just noticing it, but it's also understanding how to respond accordingly to it. So for example, research shows that those struggling more with depression may have less access to the interoception, while those with anxiety may be very attuned to what's going on, but they maybe don't respond in the way that the body actually needs it to. So again, right, so it's noticing it and also knowing how to respond accordingly. So I invite you to get curious. What cues from the body are you able to recognize? Can you feel your heart beating? Do you know when you're hungry? Do you know when you're thirsty? When you have to go to the bathroom? When you're feeling tired, etc. And just noticing which ones you have access to. Now, if you're neurodivergent, right, this is not neurotypical, right? Neurotypical, neurodivergent, and as we spoke about in the past, there's always a spectrum. So neurodivergence is very much seen in autism and ADHD, just to name a couple. So if you have been diagnosed with any of those, you may notice that you maybe don't have the attunement to your hunger cues as, say, your friend does. This is just part of the way your brain works and your connection to your body. The cool thing is that you can do the work to cultivate interoception. Again, it may not be to the degree that someone that's neurotypical has, but you can actively begin to cultivate attunement to your body and its needs. So if you don't have hunger cues and you are neurodivergent, I invite you to go back in time and get curious around, was there ever a time when you had access to your hunger cues? So if you have been chronically dieting, engaging in disordered eating, that, as we'll talk about in a moment, can also hinder your attunement to your hunger cues. So go back in time and begin to get curious around, was there ever a point in my life when I was able to feel and notice my hunger cues? If not, then accessing your hunger cues may not be available in the way that is available to others. And we'll talk more about this later on in the video, but don't worry, I got you. Now, if you never had an attunement to your hunger cues or you just don't remember, then it may take time and it may not be fully possible to have the attunement to your hunger cues as, say, your neurotypical friend does. Now, I will be talking later on in this video ways to become more attuned to build and cultivate interoception in the body. So just know that there are ways to go about this, and even if you never get access to your hunger cues, there are ways to approach food to really begin to take care of the body and its needs. We'll talk more about that later in the video. So neurodivergence is one reason why people may have less interoception than others, thereby not having full access to your hunger cues. Another reason you may not have your hunger cues is stress. Now, this is more acute stress, right? Ongoing stress is a different story. When we are in periods of acute stress, when we're in that stress response, the body is trying to survive, right? So it's not going to spend energy on resting and digesting. It's going to release different hormones like adrenaline and give you the energy that you need to flee the stress. So in acute stress, right, you may notice that you're less hungry. And you can think about this in times of a breakup or grieving when you just lose your appetite. This is because the body and the mind are under stress. Now, when it's ongoing stress, you may then find yourself leaning more into stress eating. That's a different conversation for a different day, but we will get there, friends. Another reason why you might not have access to your hunger cues is from dieting or disordered eating or just simply ignoring them. The more we ignore signs from the body as telling us we're hungry, please eat, the less attunement we'll have. So over time, you can see how ignoring your hunger cues, eventually you'll lose attunement to them. Now, that's exactly also why I asked earlier, go back in time, have you had access to your hunger cues? If you have had access, you can regain access. Our bodies are very resilient and very forgiving for what we put it through. So you can work towards becoming more attuned to your hunger cues, which we will talk about in a moment. Now, if you're struggling with an eating disorder, that's a bit more complicated because research even shows that the hypothalamus can be overridden, right? Our hypothalamus is part of the brain that regulates our appetite. So research is showing too that even eating disorders can override that. So if you are struggling with an eating disorder, it may be a little bit more complicated. However, it is very, 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 very possible. And some of the tools that I'm going to explain in a moment can be helpful. With that said, if you are struggling with an eating disorder, I do very, 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 very much encourage you to reach out for support. And I do have some resources in the description that you can utilize to find support in your area. All right, so we've talked about neurodivergence, stress, dieting. I want to talk about ignoring the hunger cues outside of dieting and disordered eating and eating disorders. You may work a job, right? Say, I know I work with a lot of nurses where it's just really hard to sit down and eat on a regular basis or know when you're going to be able to eat a meal or go to the bathroom or drink, right? So certain jobs don't allow us to be fully attuned to our body. We don't have the luxury of being in a meeting and saying to our boss, "Oh, excuse me, I'm actually hungry. I'm going to go eat my lunch now." Right? Sometimes we have to hit pause and tell the body, "I know you're hungry, but I can't do it right now." Over time, we can then begin to lose our attunement. So these are just 4 reasons as to why you may not have attunement to your hunger cues. And notice if any of them resonate for you. And the reason I'm always saying, let's get curious, is because knowing this information, you could feel some guilt and or shame around it. If I hadn't have done XYZ, I wouldn't be here. That's very, very normal. And getting stuck in that does not serve you or your future self, right? So notice that if you're getting stuck in that, notice that, and then begin to get curious. Begin to put in the work of reestablishing your relationship with your hunger cues. And that'll actually give you that sense of control where if dieting and disordered eating was part of it, you can begin to feel that sense of control, but it's control in working with your body, not against your body. So one way you can begin to attune to your hunger is to check in with yourself. So maybe you check in with yourself before meals, maybe during meals, after meals. Maybe you check in with yourself every hour of the day if you're really feeling like you have no access. Maybe setting an alarm or a reminder where you then remind yourself, okay, I'm going to check in. How am I feeling? And there's different ways that you can check in with yourself. So traditionally, we use a hunger fullness scale where traditionally it goes from 1 to 10, 1 being starving and 10 being painfully full. And then you have that spectrum in between. So if you've never worked with a hunger fullness scale and you're curious about it, I do have a free download on my website where you can download the hunger fullness scale and use it to begin to reattune. And this specific hunger fullness scale, the second page is blank and it's a writable PDF where you can then begin to fill in what your cues are for your body. Because remember, this is a very individualized practice. Your hunger cues will be very different from my hunger cues. Go ahead and download that if you're curious. And then using that scale to check in with yourself. Noticing, I'm feeling like a 3 right now. I'm going to go ahead and eat. Or I'm feeling like a 5 right now, but I also know that I'm not going to be able to eat in a few hours, so I'm going to eat right now. with this hunger and fullness scale, you have this sort of guide, and then you just check in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? And just take that information, trying to not get judgmental or critical of it, just noticing. And that can help you to begin to attune and listen to your body, thereby cultivating that interoception. Some people don't like scales. And if that's you, if you don't like working with numbers, which I completely respect, another way you can approach it is asking yourself, do I feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And just using that as your guidepost as you begin to cultivate and attune to your body. One last note on the hunger fullness scale. It can be tricky sometimes working with hunger and fullness. So you can certainly separate them out and create just a hunger scale. And maybe you use 1 to 10, 1 being not hungry at all to 10 being starving. So making it work for you, if playing with hunger and fullness is too difficult, separate it out. Just focus on the hunger. You can also use this just working with the scale, working from 1 to 5, 5 being neutral in the hunger and fullness scale. So really just playing with that part of the scale can also be really helpful. So working with a hunger and fullness scale, again, free download on my website, link is in the description. Really, really lovely tool to work with. One of the gold standards for reattuning to your hunger cues is structured, adequate eating. Our bodies love routine. So if you've been eating sort of irregular meals, not consistent, not adequate for your body, that may be, as we discussed, part of the reason why you're not accessing your hunger cues. General rule of thumb in the work that I do as an eating disorder dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor is the guideline is to eat within an hour of waking up. Now again, that's not necessarily feasible for everyone, so allowing for flexibility with this, because you don't want to get rigid with the guidelines that are also helping you to heal from the rigidity of dieting and an eating disorder. Generally speaking, eating within an hour of waking up, you have breakfast or a snack. Some people find it difficult to eat a full meal first thing in the morning. Again, listen to your body. Maybe you have a snack and then 3 hours later, then you have your meal, right? So eating within an hour of waking up and then eating approximately every 3 hours after that, and alternating between meals and snacks. This gives your body consistent energy throughout the day. It allows for more even blood sugar levels. It also allows the body to begin to trust that it's going to be getting food in adequate amounts on a regular basis. And then with that, the body gets used to it. And then you'll notice in time, as you're eating more regularly and adequately for your body, and also noticing and attuning to, oh yeah, I'm feeling like I'm thinking about food right now. I think I am hungry actually. I'm gonna go and eat right now. So attuning to that, slowly but surely, you'll begin to access your hunger cues. Now, if you're unsure of your body's needs, I do invite you to reach out to a dietitian that can help you understand that on a deeper level. So we explored reasons as to why you might not have access to your hunger cues, right? Neurodivergence, lack of interoception, attunement to the body and its needs and how to respond accordingly. We also talked about stress, acute stress, talked about dieting, disorder eating, and eating disorders. And then we also talked about ignoring our hunger cues because we can't, depending on our jobs or our lifestyles. So these are all some reasons as to why you might not have access to your hunger cues. And if you don't have them, and if none of those reasons apply to you, you can still use the tools and the tricks that I talked about to reattune to your hunger cues. And that is working with a hunger fullness scale or just a hunger scale, whether that's numerical or qualitative, right? So using a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, however your mind works, or using it more of a qualitative measurement of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then we talked about eating structured, regular, adequate meals for your body and its needs. This begins to build trust within the body and the mind that you will be feeding it adequately and regularly, and it begins to expect that. Thereby, the hunger cues start coming back online. And as you're noticing and more attuning to them, your interoception will build, you'll have more attunement and be able to respond accordingly. And all of this will also help to build a sense of trust and confidence in your relationship with you and your body. So if you like this, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the little bell to be notified of my next video. And until next time, stay curious, friends.